Hey guys, it's Charvay again. So today I will be talking about chapter 13 from Sidman's book, which is called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. So in the introduction, he starts off with talking about basically traps and how we set up avoidance and escape contingencies in order to get people to act how we want to. So we can either continue to beat people or threaten them until they act how we want them to act. And this was an example that he used that I thought was pretty interesting. And he also said that punishment, escape, and avoidance usually occur together. So an example that I thought of in this situation is a bully. And so basically, if a bully is a punisher to another kid, then that kid is going to go the other way and avoid them if they can. And so that just kind of shows how, punishment, escape, and avoidance is going to occur together because, that kid is trying to escape that person, that bully. And I thought that was, an example that went together. So Sidman also talks about how if a punishment works for us, then we're going to continue to do it. So if beating someone or threatening someone usually works, then we're going to continue to use that method in order to get people to act how we want to. But this ultimately turns us into like creatures, it turns us into monsters, he says, and tyrants and things like that. And it just turns us into horrible people. And, we shouldn't be like that. And yeah, that's pretty much kind of what he was saying, that it leads to negative things and horrible people, like I said. So next he talks about different reactions. So there are different reactions from different people when they are in similar situations. So for example, this is an example that I thought of. So if a child is told that he's going to be kicked out of school if he doesn't get his grades up and improve his grades, then I think that one child may, really work hard and push through and get his grades up, but another child may just drop out and not want to work hard. It really just depends on the child, but, I've seen both situations happen before, so it really just depends on the child. But sorry, guys. But next, he talks about the concept of freedom and how we are trying to avoid or escape something when we say freedom from. And ultimately, he talks about how this just shows us how common coercion really is. We want to get away from something, and that's us having freedom and just having control over our lives and being able to do what we want to do. And that's, getting freedom from something. Oops. Okay, so the next section he has is conditions suppression. So this is the main topic of his chapter, and he talks so much about this, and there's so much information in this section, and I think all of it was really interesting to read. And I don't talk about every little thing, but I'm going to hit the main points that I thought were interesting. So Sidman begins with talking about basic experimentation with the lab rat. So basically, the rat has to press the lever in order to get his food, but he only gets the food sometimes. And also, he gets a shock sometimes, but this is something that he can't avoid. But even though he can't avoid it, the rat continues to press the lever because it knows that food is coming eventually. And so this is kind of a leeway of the conversation about unavoidable shocks. And, he was saying that some shocks you just can't avoid, and you honestly just have to live with them. So the thing is, some of us may deal with the shocks, but others may develop anxiety, excessive stress, or nervousness. So essentially, we stop what we're doing during the shock and continue our activities after it's over. And this is what he calls conditioned suppression. So, like I said, whatever you're doing during the shock or negative event or whatever that's going on that you don't want, you just stop it. And then after it's over, then you continue to do whatever you were doing at first. So basically in this experiment in the lab, the rat's anxiety caused it to lose its food because it stopped pushing the lever when the warning sign came on. And so that's essentially how he thinks people respond. Like people lose out when things like this happen because they stop doing what they're doing. He also tested this outside of the lab. So he talks a lot about depression in this section. So in these unavoidable shocks, once again, they make life hard to deal with. So essentially, he gave the example of a person with a fatal illness. So, this person is down and they feel hopeless and they feel like there's no reason to live or, there's no reason to do anything because they're just going to die anyway. That was my takeaway from that section. They don't want to get dressed. They don't want to brush their teeth. They don't want to comb their hair and things like that. And, it's normal for people to feel like that, if they think, they're just going to die, or if they know they're just going to die anyway. And so, I think that this takes a toll on family members and friends also because, now they have to figure out, like, how am I going to live with this person for the rest of my life? And, everybody loses hope and just gives up. And this, type of situation, this unavoidable shocks, it can be applied to a multitude of scenarios. And he talks about different ones in military combat and things like that. And this situation or situations like these can also lead to a lot of suicides. And, just that depression really takes a toll on people and families. So next, Sidman talks about shocks and how they can be so harsh that we avoid interactions with the people who gave them to us. So an example that I thought of personally that happened to me, one day last week, I was at work and one of my coworkers just like snapped on me because of something I said. And it wasn't, like I said, anything bad. It was just something she just didn't like that I said. And the thing is, I had to work with her for the next 2 hours, but I was so surprised and so shocked about, how things happened. I just avoided all contact with her. I didn't want to talk to her at all. I didn't even want to be near her, but I had to. So I just didn't communicate with her at all. And, that basically kind of prepared me for something that if it happens again, which I'm pretty sure it won't. But if it does, then I know how to respond the next time. And, in these situations, I could have also become the punisher. So, she could have said something to me and I could have punished her back and said something else, but I didn't. Because that doesn't solve the problem. But anyway, so next, Sidman gets into the economics of anxiety. And so he talks about how conditioned suppression can be helpful in the future. So it basically, it may pay off later and it may bring even bigger reinforces to top the losses. Next, he gives the example of military soldiers and how some of them have a condition called combat fatigue. And so basically they were using that to get out of combat. And I thought this example was really interesting. And I kind of like this example because it really helps to illustrate how the concept of conditioned suppression really can help in the future. And, that big reinforcer of finally getting out of combat is there and you got it. So next he talks about anxiety and how anxiety is either depression or hyperactivity. And our reaction to shocks depends on whether our behavior is usually positively reinforced or coerced. And, that determines how we respond to things. And so lastly, he gets into experimentation and basically how the rat shows that, the rat can only be as anxious as it can afford to be. And also the cost of and intensity of a shock plays a role in how we respond, but reinforcers do as well. Yep. So that is my summary of the chapter. And I have 2 questions, and you can just choose whichever one you want to do. So my first question is, can you think of a time where you couldn't avoid a shock, and what was the outcome? And my second question is, talk about a time where you have experienced condition suppression, where you got a larger reinforcer after, and how did it affect you? And thank you guys for listening and watching, and I hope you enjoyed my summary. Can't wait to hear your responses.